Hi, my name is Mark Limes. I'm a physicist at Twinleaf. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to talk a little bit about a rubidium 87 gradiometer that operates in Earth's field. On the left, you see a picture of a punchline of this presentation, which is that we're able to take this sensor in the field in New Jersey, and as a clear proof of principle, detect some brainwaves. The other picture is of me and my family. I didn't include a video stream of me because I'm recording this from my shed. So our gradiometer is the result of a collaboration between Twinleaf, Princeton, and SRI International underneath the DARPA grant. This has been a great collaboration in part because we're located so closely to one another. Here's a list of some of the people that have worked on this project and others related to this project. The project we're working under is called AMBIENT. This is an ambitious program to create gradiometers, which are two magnetic field measurements separated by a fixed distance that operate in Earth's field at the 1 to 10 femtotesla per centimeter per root hertz level with a 3 centimeter baseline. The premise is that you want to detect tiny nearby magnetic sources while rejecting large common mode signals from distant magnetic sources. So if you check out the BAA of this program online, there's also some pretty aggressive requirements on size, weight, and power, as well as the sensor being heading error and dead zone free, which we've made some progress on in other work headed by Wanje and the Princeton group. For this talk, I'm going to focus on the general technique used to make this sensor and some benchmarks, and finally show some biomagnetic measurements that we've done unshielded, namely MEG and MCG. So MEG measurements have been done with surf sensors dating back to 2006, where they detected the auditory cortex response to a beep track. Here you basically want to be in the regime where the spin exchange rate swamps the Larmor precession rate, so you get a line width narrowing and an increase in field sensitivity, but you want to be at a low total field for this style of experiment. Recent notable MEG work has been published by the University of Nottingham using commercial Q-spin surf sensors, where they're able to detect and localize neural currents from a variety of activities, including hitting a ping pong ball. So while this is impressive work, all the surf-based MEG studies were done in magnetic shielding. And this arises from the surf sensor's inherently limited linearity and dynamic range. For a practical in-the-field sensor that DARPA wants, we need to handle large sources of noise and retain a linear response while things are happening like cars driving around outside, elevators moving, or keys or phones moving. So that's what we set out to do. So important aspects of our technique. Dongsheng et al. Used the fact, and RF magnetometers do this too, that by pumping into an extremely high polarization near unity, you also eliminate spin exchange relaxation, at least initially. So they pump to a high polarization along a bias field and then use an RF tipping pulse to knock the spins into a plane transverse to a bias field, then detect the free precession decay using a multipass probe. So the gist is high SNR along T2, they were able to demonstrate sub-femtotesla sensitivity at a decent fraction of Earth's field. So we want near unity spin polarization in a plane transverse to a bias field of about half a Gauss, and watch this decay with a multipass probe that gives us a large optical rotation. We avoid any coil-based techniques to stay within DARPA's initial power requirements and avoid crosstalk eventually if you have an array of these things. So Jill at Twinleaf came up with a pulsed pump diode laser that has a sub-microsecond pulses with watts of power. Using a pulse train synchronous with the Larmor precession frequency, we get high spin polarization in the plane transverse to B and see some spin exchange suppression. As you see in the cartoon, that's the first figure of our paper on this. We have two separate vacuum package cells that get pumped and probed independently, with the cell centers separated by a 3 centimeter baseline. And shown on the right is a raw capture of two decaying free precession signals from each cell. Note we are counting frequencies, which physicists are good at, and our system is in principle calibration free. Other types of measurements, like most laboratory surf sensors, are voltage measurements. So our frequency measurement has a much greater dynamic range and linearity than those type of sensors. So this parallel pump and probe configuration has a dead zone of just one dead axis along the direction of the lasers, which is important for later work. We set up a single cell sensor in the Princeton lab for John Vito and Wanje to work on, and they optimize the parameter space of a top-bottom gradiometer within a single cell and find how well we can resolve the subtraction of two detected frequencies at delta F. In the upper left, they capture multiple shots of free precession decays and fit them, and extract a gradiometer spectral density on the right, where we find that our gradiometer sensitivity is staying flat up to Earth's field. So this relative flatness is pretty remarkable in my opinion. I think it's a pretty clear demonstration of the linearity and usefulness of this type of technique. So moreover, if you take John Vito's baseline of about 0.2 centimeters and extrapolate it to our 3 centimeter baseline, this projects to about a 5 to 6 femtotesla per centimeter per root hertz in Earth's field, which is good enough for the phase 1 requirements of the DARPA program. And I don't want to get into too much detail here. I presented this for John Vito's poster at last year's DAMOP in Milwaukee. It's important to note that we're operating at the quantum limit here, which is seen on the bottom left by simply turning off the pump and monitoring spin noise. This leads to a modified Kramer-Rao bound that they derived, and showing a nice manuscript of this that's being prepared that'll hopefully be submitted soon. Okay, so that was a nice demonstration of the potential of our system, and also served as a bit of an origin story of our gradiometer. Can we realize the sensitivity in a field deployable system? So the heart of the gradiometer are nautically bonded vapor cells put in advanced radiation shielding and vacuum packaging. And Jill takes this back and aligns lasers through radiation shielding of these two cells and mounts the optics within the sensor head. So a lot of this is proprietary, but it is pretty impressive what the people at Twinleaf and SRI do, building this complicated system all contained within the green pig looking box in the picture here. So to give some stats, the cells take about 30 milliwatts per cell to heat to our operating temperature of 100 C, and remarkably outside of the sensor head is about 32 C, which is pretty cold. So other impressive proprietary stuff, the electronics developed by Tom Kornack to get all this to run. So I've used a picture from the paper here, but really what controls and detects a sensor is all contained within the little black box on the right of this picture. The other two black boxes are a synchronization board and audio board for the MEG study. The data from the counter is streamed to a LabVIEW VI, where we can see real-time FFTs of the data. So this black box really replaces a rack of test equipment I would typically need to run this thing. So throwing the sensor into a Twinleaf MS2 magnetic shielding, I get about 10 femtotesla per centimeter per root hertz at half a Gauss. This thing works pretty well. There's a loss in sensitivity from optimal, and we're still trying to figure out why. But this is good, but it's still shielded. We want to be unshielded. Now we take our sensor outside and watch the data stream in on the left here. So the black is magnetometer 1 and the orange is magnetometer 2. And you see there's a decent frequency swing here from mostly 60 hertz noise, but not terrible actually for being unshielded. We are outside, maybe a football field away from the nearest power line. So looking at the spectral densities of this type of data, you get the graph on the right. The magnetometers have about a 1 to 10 picotesla of noise across the board here, and there's some large spikes at 60 and 120, and also interestingly we see a 25 hertz component due to the New Jersey Transit and Amtrak train rail that's almost a kilometer away. So we can see the trains coming and going. Across the board there's a common mode rejection ratio of at least 2000, and we find a fit to the white noise in the band 26 to 115 hertz to be about 16 femtotesla per centimeter per root hertz. So again, we've added a little noise from what we saw in a shielded, quiet environment, and we're still trying to figure out why. Maybe polarization fluctuations, maybe it's real. It's hard to know until we build a few more of these things and look at it. In any case, we now have a portable rubidium gradiometer system that works pretty well, and it can run for many hours off a battery. What do we try to do with it? Well, so we looked at heartbeats first, and that was pretty easy. They're like picotesla. But we want to see brain waves, and this part of the work was not funded by DARPA, by the way. So for a proof of principle MEG demonstration, we do a audio evoked field detection. And for those of you unfamiliar with MEG, this particular test is a measurement of your auditory cortex neurons firing to a conscious observation of a little beep. The model for this electrical firing, they use what's called a current dipole, essentially just a little burst of current in one direction you can imagine as an arrow. And with that, you can use your right hand rule and draw some B fields around a source. So when I'm talking about source localization for MEG, they try to map out this B field and then do the inverse problem to find the location of the neurocurrents. So here we set up outside in August of 2019 and set up our gradiometer next to a subject's auditory cortex, a little above the ear. Say on the right side of the head, as the diagram in the upper right shows. Then we send in a randomized 1 kilohertz audio beep. That randomly occurs every 1.5 to 2.5 seconds into the opposite ear with a special earphone that has a long non-magnetic tube that goes into the ear. Then we record data for about 10 to 20 minutes, which apparently is typical for this type of experiment, to build up some statistics. So another thing I should note about the diagram on the upper right is the orientation of the sensor with respect to the bias field. So this is a scalar sensor, so we're only first order sensitive to changes along Earth's field in this problem. Our gradiometer is measuring dBz by dx, where z is the direction of Earth's field. And you see that in the picture on the left, you can imagine the B field direction to be like an arrow through the side of Mike's head. So we're sitting in a chair that's kind of at a funny angle. So in the middle, I show what the raw gradiometer data from a typical trial looked like. There's some drift, and then a little inset, you see there's randomized beeps going on, but the data looks like noise. Upon averaging this hundreds of times and applying some filtering, however, you get a very nice looking response as shown on the right. So we've labeled some peaks for people in the neuroscience community. N100M, for example, stands for negative 100 milliseconds magnetic peak, which is a big signature of the auditory response. So here's our proof of principle demonstration of a portable rubidium-87 gradiometer detecting meg signals. We saw evoked fields in our 4 subjects. This was the largest, perhaps most focused subject. We did things like removing the earpiece and not seeing any response. This is, as far as we're aware of, the first time a first order gradiometer has been used in an unshielded demonstration like this. All other squid-based unshielded tests have used higher order gradiometers. So after about a month of sporadic attempts, we saw this initial signal. We spent a few days taking data and convincing ourselves this was real, and moved on with the program. So the proof of principle done. Okay, so here's a pic of me and Dave Newby from Twinleaf of an earlier version of the portable sensor taking some heartbeats in the wild. And this was in April 2019. The paper's on the archive that just as we built and studied some high sensitivity magnetometers and gradiometers that work pretty well in unshielded environments. And we use it to detect some biomagnetic fields. There's a lot more work to do. 2 of the big items that stand out are improving the performance. We need to squeeze out a few more femtotesla. Juan J. Lee has made some great headway on this. Something outside the scope of ambient that is being actively pursued is making the scalar sensor a vector sensor by applying some rotating fields, and Tao Wang is working on this. I think they're not showing posters on this, however. So we also need to make an array out of these sensors, and part of that is manufacturability. So a step in that direction at Twinleaf, now a simpler, less sensitive version of the same system I presented is available. So we want an off-the-shelf source for a relatively high-performance scalar magnetometer that works in Earth's field for other companies who want to start, to develop heartbeat sensors for things like triage, or are interested in things like magnetic navigation or anomaly detection. Okay, so the DARPA collaboration between Princeton, Twinleaf, and SRI lives on. Hopefully you'll be hearing more out of this work soon. On the left is a picture of the group, Romalis group, when I was in it, and on the right is, I don't have many pictures of the SRI Twinleaf people, but going left to right is Sterling from SRI, Mike Romalis, Jill from Twinleaf, and Tom from Twinleaf. So thanks for listening, and please email me at limes.mark@gmail.com for questions.